During the pandemic, world hunger and malnutrition levels worsened dramatically. Experts agree that it has exposed the weakness in our food systems. In fact, according to a recent multi-agency United Nations reports, the number of undernourished people rose up to 811 million worldwide. Now, according to this report, this number is equivalent to 10% of the world's population. This is also an increase of about 118 million since 2019. So how do we address this problem going forward? For more insight, we connect with the UN World Food Program Deputy Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, Director Kyungnan Park. Hello, Director Park.
Hi, good morning to everybody.
Thank you very much for joining us on the program. So let's jump right in and begin with a look at the recent UN report. What more can you tell us about this recent report, and are there any feasible plans in place to address this crucial issue?
Well, the state of food insecurity in the World Report reflects the impact of COVID-19 on food security and malnutrition. Between 2014 to 2019, chronic hunger rose by 43 million people to 650 million. But then just in 2020, this number is up to 811 million people that experience chronic hunger, as you mentioned. This, in very simple numbers, is 1 in 10 of the global population. For me, we're seeing advances in the world with billionaires racing to go to space, when a basic meal is out of reach of the most vulnerable families due to conflict, climate extremes, and economic downturn on top of COVID-19. Inflation combined with job losses due to COVID-19 pandemic, persistent income inequality continue to aggravate the food insecurity and nutrition. And over the last 3 months, the cost of a basic food basket has gone up by more than 10% in 9 countries where WFP works in the region. The effect of this is children are paying a heavy price with immediate effects on health and lifelong effects to their brains and bodies. In 2020, and not yet accounting for the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, over 149 million under 5s were estimated to have been stunted or too short for their age, and more than 45 million are wasted or too thin for their height. And nearly on top of that, 39 million are overweight. So what is WFP doing, as you asked? In 2020, WFP, the World Food Program, we reached 115 million people. And we are undertaking the biggest operation in history, targeting 138 million people in 2021, as the most vulnerable people are faced with impossible choices, and the need for WFP to support them is here more than ever. Our overall mandate is about saving lives and changing lives for the most food insecure and vulnerable in the world.
The UN actually has a set of sustainable development goals of ending poverty and achieving zero hunger by 2030. Now, yes, the pandemic-induced situation does affect, it seems, a zero hunger goal. So how will it impact that goal that still stands?
So out of the Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 2 is zero hunger, as you said. And even before the COVID-19 pandemic, we were not on track to end world hunger and malnutrition in all its forms by 2030. Around 660 million people may still face hunger in 2030, in part due to the lasting effects of COVID-19 pandemic on global food security. This is about 30 million more people in a scenario if the pandemic had not occurred. More than half of them are undernourished, and they're found in Asia. An additional 1/3 are in Africa. And about 1 in 3 people did not have access to adequate food in 2020. We've seen famine on the rise, driven by conflict and fueled by climate shocks and economic downturn. And there's a hunger pandemic with about 41 million people on the very edge of famine. And without immediate emergency food assistance, they too face starvation. And this number has risen from 27 million in 2019. Reversing the current high levels of chronic hunger will take years, if not decades. And unfortunately, no region of the world has been spared. This is rather worrisome as this number is expected to increase between now and 2030. And reaching our goal of zero hunger by 2030 will require immense effort and solutions from everybody.
This would also imply that governments would need to promise more proactive relief and quickly at that. Is that what you're implying too?
We'll need to rely on further contributions, further engagement. And it's not just governments. I think each person can do a little bit of its own, whether it's me as an individual giving individually, whether it's me in the private sector doing more corporate social responsibility. And everything is interlinked. We have the Food System Summit that's happening this year with the pre-summit happening right now in the month of July in Rome. And this is how do we make sure that food travels from the production to the plate? Because honestly, in the world, there is enough food for every single person. It's an issue of access at the moment.
All right. So, how has the World Food Program also been addressing the COVID-19 in the countries they are present? Because, as you've said, that's an unavoidable big change, I suppose, in this plan to reach zero hunger 2030.
I think the COVID-19 opened our eyes. We're used to being in emergencies. We've been in earthquakes, we've been in hurricanes, personally myself. But I think it's the first time that it's affected every single person. And it's been unprecedented. And in the early stages of the pandemic, the World Food Program, we scaled up our unique logistics capacity to support the wider humanitarian community. And I can speak for this region. There were no airplanes that were either carrying humanitarian supplies, nor even the aid workers that we needed to travel to countries such as Haiti or even here to Panama to help. So at the time, the World Food Program started a program of actually carrying out the transport, air, ship, and whatnot to move the personal protective equipment for various humanitarian agencies and governments. And now, as commercial carriers have resumed flights, we phased down this part of the passenger and cargo services. But it is ready to start back up as everything is unpredictable with the pandemic, whether it's a second, third, or fourth wave that people are experiencing in the countries. We're currently expanding our infrastructure to make sure we can meet any other temperature-sensitive storage and transport requirements, and we're ready to respond to any health responses. And that's just on the logistics part. On the programmatic part, we've supported 37 governments in helping their social protection systems, whether it's with cash vouchers so that people have access to and the purchasing power to buy food. And also, we've worked in 57 countries where we've adapted the school meals program that was for school children to be able to help the children that are no longer in the schools but attending at home to be able to have their meal, their nutritious meal at home. And this is often the time that the programs that we have in the World Food Program, the lunch is the one meal that they eat every day. So it was a very big challenge for the World Food Program to take this into an in-school feeding to a take-home ration, as we call it, so the children can have their meals at home.
I do apologize. We're having a little bit of connection difficulty, so I'm getting patches of your voices, but I'm conferring with my team outside. If the conditions are well, then I'll continue with the interview. All right, we're going to turn our attention to Latin America and the Caribbean region because this is where Director Park is located. Some of our listeners may be unaware of the situation there, so let me provide the backdrop first. Now, this region seems to be never short of multiple political unrests, internal conflicts, natural disasters, and recently an assassination of the Haitian president. Now, even under the best circumstances, executing these number of different WFP missions must have been faced with a set of its own challenges. Now, I assume that the WFP staff on the ground face a lot of challenges trying to carry out these missions. So how are you guys handling these multiple events that are unique to the region to serve those who are in need?
Well, I think you've given a pretty good backdrop. I'm not sure if this is very common knowledge, but Latin America and the Caribbean has become the region most impacted by COVID-19 globally. accounting for over a quarter of the world's cases, with an intense spread of the virus that is outpacing the capacity of the health systems here locally. And according to the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, COVID-19 has led the region into the worst economic recession in over a century. And right now, if I were to, with this being said, how are we dealing with this? Back in 2020 in January, we estimated about 3.5 million people severely food insecure. And that was in 13 countries where we had presence. And now, more than a year later, this figure is 4 times higher than pre-crisis. That's about 14 million people. So we've gone from 3.5 to 14 million people in this region. And we respond to emergencies, and it's what we do, it's our bread and butter. But it's stretching our staff as well. But if I were to talk in 3 subregions, we've got the Caribbean subregion, which covers the countries of the 22 small island states and territories in the Caribbean, Cuba, Dominican Republic, and Haiti. Countries have been forced to balance the management of imported COVID-19 cases with the need to keep the borders open for tourism. And also the record-setting hurricane season in 2020 caused significant damage and highlighted the potential for compounded crisis of a natural disaster, economic shock, and a health crisis. And we're even now responding to other disasters in this region, such as the eruption of the La Soufrière volcano in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I think everybody is quite aware of the situation in Cuba, where it's experiencing the worst economic recession in the last 3 decades, with a drop in GDP of 11% last year. And this difficult economic and financial situation of the country has strongly been affected by the pandemic of COVID-19. All of this has caused a sharp decrease in 2021. The sources of incomes at the national level and the households, everything accentuating the shortage of fuel, inputs, food, and basic goods. So that's Cuba. And on this other side of the Caribbean is Haiti, as you correctly mentioned. With the assassination of the president, the worsening security and humanitarian access related limitations, this has hampered the WFP operations. Access to the south of Haiti is no longer an option by road. And this impacts us because if we have to do it a different way, it will probably cost us much more, as well as the value of the food basket having increased significantly. And I think the other subregion that's very, very important right now is the South America subregion, which the Venezuelan migrant crisis in South America is only second to Syria. It has over 5.5 million Venezuelans, which is over 15% of the population having fled their country, and over 80% staying in Latin America and the Caribbean. And WFP is working in countries like Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, to be able to work on how do we help these Venezuelan migrants. And lastly, the Central America region where we work in 4 countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. And the number in this region has changed from, we had 2.2 million people in 2018 in severe food insecurity to 8.6 in 2021. That's almost threefold. And we know that there's an interaction between food insecurity, climate change, and migration, as well as violence, family reunification, and poverty. So we're working to expand our operations in Central America to be able to give durable solutions so people can stay at home because nobody really wants to move.
Director Park, we have a question from one of our listeners, and I may want to go back to revisit and ask you to elaborate on the situation in Haiti. This is a question from our regular listener, Kevin Leonard. How much has the political instability in Haiti exacerbated the delivery of food, given the pandemic, the endemic poverty, and the fact that hundreds of thousands are still in temporary shelters?
In Haiti, Haiti, since the earthquake, has had a lot of challenges. In the beginning, we would do transport through land. And at some point, I think about 2 years ago, we started relying on air services. So the World Food Program, we manage a UN humanitarian air service that's not only for passengers, but also for cargo. And I said right now, the South, the entry to the South is impossible with the insecurity, and it has affected our operation. We're unable to deliver the assistance to the South of the country. Right now, the country office is looking at expanding the air services to be able to deliver and reach the affected populations that we're unable to reach. It is a concern of us. We don't have a short-term solution, and we're continuing to look at the solution because the air solution is a rather expensive one. But if that's the choice that we have to take, that's the choice we're going to do. The cost of a life is not something we're willing to step back from.
Director Park, you said earlier that individuals like myself can actually make our own contributions. Can you at least point us into direction as, well, how can I help?
Off the top of my head, there is an application called Share the Meal. And it's an application that we have, and you log in, and it's a way for you to give contributions to the organization through our www.wfp.org. There is also a space for contributions individually. We do have a WFP Korea office that is very, very open to receiving contributions and working with people on how you can help as well.
All right. I do want to go to our last question today. The WFP, for all of its efforts during the pandemic too, won the Nobel Peace Prize last year. How has this honor impacted the World Food Program as an organization?
This is an award that surprised me. I was actually in Korea when the announcement came out, and I was reading the text, and I was thinking, this is spam. This is what's going on, and it's an honor for me because I've worked in WFP for about 22 years, and not many people know who the World Food Program is, and I've even had instances where people thought that we were a very small organization. And this award that's shared with 20,000 of the staff of the World Food Program. And it's to thank every day of every minute that they spend working to help save lives and change lives. And during the COVID pandemic, none of them stayed at home to make sure they had to go out and deliver and help others that were more needy. So for me, this award is something that is shared with many others. It's not just us as the World Food Program, but it's every humanitarian that works. And we celebrate this because it's all of us working in the front lines, whether it's hunger, whether it's conflict, whether it's human rights, whether it's education. And it's something that I think really is a tribute to many of those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice in the course of their vital work. We've lost various colleagues to COVID-19, and before COVID-19, we've lost colleagues to security incidents. And we're really, really humbled by this award. I personally find myself very, very fortunate that I can wake up every morning and I have the desire to go to work. And I want to do what I do with the hope that every day I help change, even if it is a little bit, the lives of people and the world itself.
Director Park, thank you so much for bringing our listeners closer to understanding what the World Food Program does. And of course, thank you for your continued efforts.
Thank you very much.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.